was recently asked to share behavior strategies that I feel are effective in the classroom. As we think about behavior, we know that it begins first with a connection.
We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance, negative peer influences. We know why. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection. Relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like. Can we stand to have more relationships? Absolutely. Will you like all your children? Of course not. And you know your toughest kids are never absent. Never. You won't like them all, and the tough ones show up for a reason. It's the connection. It's the relationships. And while you won't like them all, the key is they can never, ever know it. So teachers become great actors and great actresses, and we come to work when we don't feel like it, and we listen to policy that doesn't make sense, and we teach anyway. We teach anyway because that's what we do. Teaching and learning should bring joy. How powerful would our world be if we had kids who were not afraid to take risks, who were not afraid to think, and who had a champion? Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Is this job tough? You betcha. Oh God, you betcha. But it is not impossible. We can do this. We're educators. We're born to make a difference. Thank you so much.
You may have seen that video in the past, and as we think about being purposeful with the behavior strategies that we use in the classroom, we must value the connection and the relationship that we have with our students. As I share the behavior strategies that I feel are effective in my classroom, from the experience and the trainings that I've received, I just want to say that I've seen some of these modeled in your classrooms as well, and this is an area that I'm continuing to grow in, and I just hope that you can take something away today. As I think about steps in being purposeful regarding behavior, the first step that I try to be intentional about is breathing to recalibrate, or taking the time to recalibrate. And that can look different in the classroom. Often I use breathing strategies with my students. Sometimes I use think sheets when I need to recalibrate myself, or also ask them to reflect upon what's happened in that behavior situation. I also will use writing as a connection to enable them to recalibrate, as well as provide the time I need to reflect and be purposeful instead of reactive. Often I will ask my students to look at a social contract reflection and go back to that document that we created together at the beginning and think about, what am I doing right now that might be breaking that agreement. And then I also use the redirection with capturing kids' hearts questions, and we'll look more at what those look like, but they're an effective tool. Now, all of these enable me to recalibrate and also de escalate most students. After I've given those tools, secondly, I think about reflecting, reevaluating, and making a connection. And with that, I have to be intentional and purposeful because it isn't always natural. I try to begin by showing appreciation for something the student does well. It might be arriving on time each day, or it might be their ability to help, but I try to make that connection by appreciating them, which creates an immediate buy in with the student because they don't feel like you're on the opposite side. I also think about the student's motivation, and I think sometimes this is something that we don't always take the time to do. It is a question in our low level office referrals, and I think it's important to think about why is the student making this decision at this time? Do they need something they're not receiving from me? Or maybe it's not even about me. Maybe it's something they're facing. And then I think about how can I intentionally decide in this moment, how can I connect with the student? What can I do? And how can I be heard? I often use sentence starters that I feel are effective. If they're escalated, I will say, make your voice match mine when you speak to me. And I often have to repeat that a couple of times. Sometimes I will use the sentence starter because I love and care about you, and then I'll finish that sentence with whatever we might be discussing at the time. So it might look like this: because I love and care about you, I don't want you to continue to make choices that harm your education or the safety of our learning environment. I also often use this sentence starter: since the social contract states blank, and then I finish it with the appropriate situation that we might be trying to work through. Thirdly, I try to validate the student even if I disagree with what they might feel. That might look different in each situation, but I think validating what they feel is an important step in making a connection and growing that relationship with the student. So I might say something like, I can tell by your face that you're very frustrated about this situation. So that validates how they feel, even if I do not necessarily see it in the same perspective. Fourthly, I try to listen in some way. Now, I realize that we can't always step into the hallway and take long periods of time to deal with behavior problems. So, if I don't have that time, I offer sentence starters that help them to share what they feel without mandating a lot of time. So, that might look like something like this: I felt blank when blank happened. That's much faster than them sharing all of the details that they want to share. Even though there are times when I do need to hear all of the details, sometimes we just don't have the time in that moment. And so offering those sentence starters can enable you to listen without it requiring a lot of your time. Also, ask yes or no questions and expect yes or no answers. So it might look like this: can you tell me yes if you agree that you broke the social contract, or no, do you feel that you did not break the social contract? And sometimes I will give examples in that are more specific to the behavior. Sometimes I'll also ask for a thumbs up or a thumbs down. That might look like this: give me a thumbs up if you feel frustrated with the fact that you lost dojo points as a result of this choice. Fifthly, I try to make sure that I reteach, model, and restate. And when I think about behavior, I think about the fact that each student doesn't come with the same experience. So when we think about that, we have to also be the person or the difference. So if they don't come with that background knowledge, and many do not, about what's appropriate, then who will teach them? Because those same things may not be valued at home. So we have to take the time to reteach what's expected instead of assuming that they know just because that's our background and our experience. And then I try to conclude with gratitude or end with a clean slate, showing them appreciation and giving them the tools they need to know that I love them unconditionally, and that although I may not be supportive of the choices that they made, that doesn't change my relationship with them. And I think it's important that they know that relationship isn't broken. There are some tips that I try to follow that I've learned along the way. I try to avoid asking why, and I think we do that in education all the time. So that might look like if you're walking down the hallway, you might say to a student, "Well, why are you not in line?" Well, we don't honestly want to know why. And when we do that, it creates a conversation and even an argument. So instead of asking why, I just give a redirection and restate the expectation. I also think it's important to keep open communication with parents, and sometimes that means choosing your battles. So we don't always need to disclose everything, every tiny situation to parents, and we may not even need to handle every single situation. We have to be wise in those battles, but we do want to keep those lines of communication open, especially if it's repeated. And many of you do an excellent job of that. You saw in the previous slide, I mentioned capturing kids' hearts. I had the privilege of attending a several day long training, and this I feel has attributed to many effective behavior strategies for me. And there are a lot of resources out there to help with capturing kids' hearts. But some of the most effective that I feel enable me to recalibrate and reset, as well as communicate the expectation to students and enable them to reflect, are these guiding questions. When a misbehavior occurs in the classroom, I often redirect by asking in a calm way, "What are you doing? What are you supposed to be doing? Are you doing it? What are you going to do now? So, what's going to happen if you do it again and break our social contract?" If it's a disrespect question, who are you talking to? How are you supposed to be talking to? And then the adult's name, if it's me or another adult. Were you doing it? So, how are you going to talk to me now? Or, so what's going to happen if you talk to me again that way and break our social contract? These are ways that prevent me from escalating, so I'm remaining calm, but also redirecting. Part of behavior and understanding, being intentional and purposeful, is understanding that our social contract should be a living document. For me personally, this is what mine looks like this year. Created it with my students, but it's also a document that we reflect on often. We think about what needs to change. What do we need to add? What do we need to take away? What's something that we're struggling with? What's something that we're doing a great job of? But it should be something that is living in our classroom. So, not something we just create and leave. I often print these, and when I'm asking my students to reflect, I will have them circle things that or highlight things that they aren't doing in that moment. So if they're repeatedly talking without permission, I may give them a copy and ask them to circle what characteristic are you breaking, which expectation are you breaking. That allows them to reflect quickly, and also may allow me a couple of minutes to think about what are they not understanding from this document that we created. So maybe we used words on this document that we really didn't understand at the time in practical application. But our social contract should be a living document that grows with us as we form and build those relationships and make those connections. I also feel it's important to think about what can we control and what can't we control. And I often redirect by thinking about that circle of control. And I think this is a resource that's been shared with us in the past. That's an effective resource, and it enables me to redirect often. So if it's something that a student is doing that's with another student, I can simply ask them, "Is that in your circle of control?" Or if they're frustrated about something that isn't in their control, like their iPad or the fact that they have to wear a mask, I can ask them, "Is that in your control?" Well, what is in your control? And this is a great tool that I've recently added within the last 2 years that I feel has changed the dynamics of that understanding regarding behavior. Some of the reactive strategies that I try to avoid are immediately responding um, and understanding that that's not the same as losing control. And I think sometimes we think if we don't handle it right then, that we're losing control of the situation. I think sometimes choosing the appropriate way to handle it is better than immediately responding. I also tried not to be an authoritative dictator in the classroom, but instead being and modeling professionalism. And in order to do that, I have to remain calm and I can't be in my emotional state. And part of our social contract every year is remaining calm. And so I have to model that in the way that I handle those behavior challenges. Thirdly, tearing down to produce submissive behaviors as opposed to teaching, reteaching, and modeling. And I think this is something that we do unintentionally. So we've all said before, we've done this 1,000 times. Why can you not do it? Or I've taught you how to log into Canvas. Why do you not know how to do that? And I think that tears down. And what we want is just for them to know how. But that might create a submissive behavior, but is it truly teaching or reteaching or modeling, or is it just tearing down to get the results that we want? And when we do that, is that damaging the relationship that we have with that student? Is it breaking that connection? So once again, those are things I try to avoid. And of course, these are things that I am still working hard to master as well. Thank you for your time. As I've shared previously, I'm still learning and growing, and I would love to continue to grow from each of you as well.